Okay, so we got this article about equivalence bands,
Uh-huh.
and it sounds kind of complicated, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
But it's about hiring.
Uh-huh.
It's from this 1998 paper
Okay.
by a Guinness.
A Guinness, like the beer.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Cortina and Goldberg.
Gotcha.
And it's in the Human Performance Journal.
All right.
So basically, we're going to, figure out what these things are
Yeah.
and why they matter,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you've ever had to take a test
Right.
to get a job.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting to me about this
Okay.
is that it's all about this balance.
Yeah.
Like, companies obviously want the best people,
Yeah, of course.
but they also have to be fair.
Right.
And they have
Yeah.
to think about diversity.
Yeah.
So how do you do all of that at the same time?
Exactly.
That's where these equivalence bands come in.
That's what they're trying to do. Yeah.
So imagine you're applying for a job
Okay.
and you got to take some kind of test.
Uh-huh.
Right. No test is perfect. We all know that.
Right. Right.
What if your score is just a tiny bit lower
Yeah.
than someone else's?
Yeah.
Does that automatically mean
Yeah.
that they're better than you?
Right. Are they really a better candidate?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what a Guinness and his colleagues are looking at. They're saying those little differences may not actually mean anything
Right.
in terms of who's going to do better at the job. So equivalence bands group similar scores together.
So it's like acknowledging
Yeah.
there's this margin of error.
Exactly. Exactly. You can't be so precise that 1 point makes all the difference.
So instead of ranking everybody
Yeah.
based on these tiny, tiny differences,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of saying hey, you know what?
Yeah.
These folks are all pretty much equal.
Yeah, equally qualifies in
Yeah.
terms of their potential.
Right.
So there's this traditional way of making these bands
Okay.
from way back in 1991
Okay.
by Cascio and some other folks. And they focused just on the test itself.
Okay.
Like, how reliable is the test?
Okay, so how consistently does it measure?
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever it's supposed to measure.
Exactly.
So if it's super reliable
Yeah.
and it's consistent every time,
Mm-hmm.
then the bands would be narrower.
Right.
Because you can trust those tiny differences more.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Guinness and his co-authors,
Yeah.
they point out something super important.
Okay.
They say this traditional method
Uh-huh.
leaves out something really critical.
What's that?
It ignores how those test scores connect to job performance.
Oh, okay.
And that's the test's validity.
So are they saying that a test
Yeah.
could be super reliable,
Uh-huh.
but still not be fair
Right.
if it doesn't actually tell you
Yeah.
how well someone will do the job?
That's exactly right.
Wow.
So you could have a really reliable test
Okay.
that measures, say, attention to detail. But what if attention to detail isn't really that crucial for a specific job? Then those scores don't really tell you who's going to be the best fit.
Right.
So their new method brings in job performance.
Okay, so they're actually looking at what happens in the real world.
They are. It's
Okay.
a 3-step process.
Okay.
First, they figure out
Yeah.
how much variation in job performance actually matters.
Okay.
So think about rating scales.
Okay.
Is a 1-point difference?
Yeah.
On a 5-point scale, a big deal.
Probably not.
Right. So they're saying
Yeah.
small differences might not be that important
Okay.
in the big picture.
Okay.
Second, they use the test scores to predict job performance.
Okay.
But they remember that scores tend to regress towards the mean.
Okay. What did that mean?
So basically, those super high test scores
Uh-huh.
might not translate to equally amazing performance
Oh, interesting.
on the job.
Okay.
And the same thing for low scores. So they figure out the range of predicted job performance based on the test. But taking that tendency into account.
So it's not just the raw scores.
No, not just the raw scores.
It's what do those scores actually mean?
Exactly.
Okay.
For how someone might actually perform.
Gotcha.
And that leads to the third step.
Okay.
They work backward
Okay.
to figure out which band of test scores
Uh-huh.
matches that range of predicted performance.
So the bands are actually grounded in real-world outcomes.
Exactly.
Instead of just how the test is designed.
That's it.
Okay, so to illustrate this,
Yeah.
they use a study from 1988
Mhm.
by Campion and others.
Right.
And this study looked at scores from a structured interview.
Right.
And they showed how to actually make this new method work.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It is.
It's like they're shifting the whole focus
Yeah.
from the test itself to
Right.
finding the right person for the job.
That's exactly right.
And they made a table.
They did.
Table 1,
Uh-huh.
that shows how wide the bands are
Yeah.
based on how good the test is
Mhm.
at predicting performance.
Exactly.
So even with this new method,
Yeah.
the width of the band can change.
It's not fixed, no.
Okay.
So
But-
for example,
Yeah.
if the test isn't very good at predicting how well someone will do, the bands get wider.
So if you're taking one of these tests
Yeah.
and the company's using a test that's not very good,
Uh-huh.
those tiny differences
Right.
matter even less.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens.
Okay.
If the company's way of measuring performance
Uh-huh.
isn't very reliable,
Okay.
so fuzzy performance data
Yeah.
makes it harder to create really precise bands
Right.
that reflect meaningful differences in
Oh.
potential.
So if you're ever taking one of these tests,
Mm-hmm.
you really want to know,
Yeah.
is this test actually good at predicting how I'll do?
That's a great question to ask
yeah.
because those scores
Are being used to make these bands
right.
that decide who even gets considered.
Exactly.
Who doesn't.
That's a really good point.
This is.
It makes you think about it differently.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It highlights why understanding all this is so important for anyone looking for a job.
Yeah, for sure.
Because these tests are everywhere.
Absolutely.
They're everywhere.
So it's important to know how they work
Exactly.
and what they really mean.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's all about making informed decisions
Right.
and advocating for yourself
Yeah.
in the job market.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder, though, right? Like, even with a system
Yeah.
that's trying to be more fair,
Uh-huh.
you still have to think about
Yeah.
how it could be used.
Yeah, like in the real world.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
any tool, it can be used in ways
Yeah.
that maybe weren't intended.
Right. So let's play devil's advocate here.
Okay, yeah.
How could someone manipulate this system? That's a good question.
Even if they're trying to be fair.
Right. Even with good intentions.
Yeah.
Well, remember that first step in a Guinness's method?
Figuring out how much variation matters.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like how much is meaningful?
Yeah.
That definition of meaningful,
Right.
that could be subjective, right?
Oh, so you could tweak the definition
You could, yeah.
to favor certain people.
Potentially, yeah. Like imagine setting a really high bar
Oh,
for what's meaningful.
yeah.
You create these narrow bands
Okay.
and only a few people fit in.
And maybe those people just happen to have the qualities
Yeah, it
that
pops.
the hiring manager wants.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of a slippery slope.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It shows why you need clear criteria
Okay.
that everyone agrees on.
Right. Like beforehand.
Yeah, in advance.
So everyone knows the rules.
Exactly. Transparency is key.
Yeah.
And another issue is the data itself.
Oh.
We talked about how important the test's validity is.
Yeah.
But what if the data used to figure that out
Yeah.
is messed up somehow?
Like, what if it's biased?
Exactly. Like if the data comes from a time
Right.
when certain groups were at a disadvantage,
Right.
then the test might keep those inequalities going.
Even with the bands.
Even with the bands, yeah.
Oh.
Because those little score differences
Yeah.
might reflect things outside someone's control.
Right. It might not be about their actual ability.
Exactly. So you have to really look closely
Right.
at where the data comes from,
Okay.
make sure it's representative,
Gotcha.
and doesn't have those built-in biases.
So it's not just about the method.
No,
It's about the whole system.
it's about the whole thing, yeah. Making sure it's fair from the ground up.
And that includes the data.
Exactly.
And it should go beyond just the technical stuff too, right?
Right. The whole process needs to be transparent
Okay.
with documentation and a way to appeal decisions.
So if someone feels like they
Yeah.
were treated unfairly,
Yeah,
they could say something.
exactly. Checks and balances are crucial.
Right.
That might mean
Yeah.
independent reviews
No?
or hiring committees
Right.
with diverse viewpoints and ways to give feedback.
So it's not like a one-time fix.
No, it's ongoing. You're
Right.
always checking.
Right.
Make sure things are working the way they should.
It's a commitment.
It is. It is.
Awareness.
Equivalence bands, when they're done right,
Yeah.
can be a really powerful tool
Okay.
for both excellence and equity.
Mm.
But they're not magic.
Right.
They have to be part of a bigger effort
Yeah.
to make hiring fair and transparent.
This reminds me of what we were saying before
Uh-huh.
about that tension between finding the best people
Yeah.
and making sure things are fair.
It's always there.
It's always there.
Yeah, it's a constant balancing act.
And we have to be aware of it.
Absolutely. There's no easy answer. It's a
Yeah.
process. But we can try to make things better.
We can by understanding the complexities
Right.
and trying to address the potential problems.
We can move towards a more just system.
That's the goal.
Okay, so we talked about the downsides
Mm-hmm.
and how to avoid them.
Yeah.
But let's not forget the good stuff.
Yeah.
Like, what can these bands actually do
That's a great point.
when they're used effectively?
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears.
Okay.
And focus on how they can help create more opportunities.
Yeah.
For everyone.
Yeah. It's easy to focus on, like, what could go wrong.
Yeah.
But this was designed with good intentions, right?
Yes, it was. It was.
To make things fair.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it can really do that.
Okay.
Think about the traditional way.
Mm-hmm.
It relies on those tiny score differences.
Right.
That we said.
Yeah.
Might not mean much.
Yeah.
In terms of actual performance.
Right.
And that can hurt people from underrepresented groups. Especially if they haven't had the same opportunities in education or access to resources.
So those small gaps might not actually be about ability.
Exactly.
But about other factors.
Yeah, things outside their control.
That they can't really control.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, equivalence bands address this by acknowledging that tests aren't perfect.
Right.
And focusing on the range of scores that predict similar performance.
So it's like leveling the playing field a little bit.
Yeah, it helps. It helps.
It's like saying, let's focus on the skills that matter.
Exactly.
Instead of these arbitrary cutoffs.
Exactly, the arbitrary numbers.
Yeah.
It's about the bigger picture.
And this could help people with, like, unconventional backgrounds.
Yeah, definitely.
Who might not look good on paper.
Right. Their experience might not show up on a traditional resume.
Or in a standardized test.
Exactly. Exactly. So you get to see a broader range of talent.
You do. You do.
Yeah.
Organizations can tap into that.
Right. All these different perspectives.
Yeah. A wider pool of skills and ideas.
Yeah.
And that diversity, that can be a huge advantage.
Right. Like for problem solving.
For problem solving.
Yeah.
For innovation.
And for just creating a more inclusive environment.
Exactly. A more welcoming workplace.
Yeah.
For everyone.
Yeah. It sounds like everybody wins.
It does. It does.
Candidates get a fair shot.
Uh-huh.
And companies get a better workforce.
That's the goal. That's the ideal.
Yeah.
But of course, it requires using these bands the right way.
Yeah, ethically.
Ethically, thoughtfully.
Like we were talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the potential is there.
It is. It is.
To make a real difference.
So this has been a really interesting deep dive.
It has. It has.
We started with this technical idea.
Yeah, equivalence bands.
And we ended up talking about fairness and diversity.
Yeah.
And the whole future of hiring.
It's all connected.
It is.
It shows how these small changes in how we evaluate people can have a big impact.
Yeah, a ripple effect.
A ripple effect, exactly.
We talked about the risks.
Yeah.
But also the potential benefits.
The possibilities for a more just system.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play.
We do.
Whether we're designing these systems or taking the tests.
Or advocating for fairness.
Yeah.
Our choices matter.
So as you go out there.
Yeah.
And navigate the world of hiring, keep these things in mind.
Ask questions.
Yeah.
Challenge assumptions.
Don't be afraid to speak up.
And fight for systems that are fair
Yeah.
and value everyone's potential.
The future of work depends on it.
It really does.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.